On today's show, I am breaking down the worst case scenario for the Rangers off season. What would it look like if the Rangers decided not to spend and to be content with what they have? All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to the Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan since 2010, the founder and host for all 4 seasons of this Locked On Rangers podcast. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers and subscribe on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment any single thing below. It is December 1st. We have finally made it to December. We are towards the end of the last week of probably the deadest week of the offseason before things start happening. January is always pretty chill, but until the winter meetings happen and some contracts start getting signed, this is about as dead as it's getting. By the way, since it is December 1st, for those of you who use Spotify, if you have Locked On Rangers in the top 5 of your most listened to in your Spotify Wrapped playlist, don't listen to the haters. I want to see those. Tweet them at me at Bryce Patrick. Tweet them at me at Locked On Rangers, or email them to me. I guess if that's your thing. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening like you do. Now, for those of you optimists, if you liked yesterday's episode, that's great. For those of you pessimists who didn't like yesterday's episode, this is an even better option for you, because this is the worst case scenario. Now, I did say in the cold open that, what if the Rangers decide not to spend? They're going to spend something. By that, I mean not spend big. So let's look at what I think is the worst possible scenario. Again, the Rangers need 2 starting pitchers, a bat, and let's throw in a reliever. I didn't yesterday, but I feel like let's just throw in a reliever because we can. Let's start, like we always should, with the starting pitching, because it is the biggest part of the Rangers offseason. I have seen a certain beat writer, I'm not going to name any names, say that Jameson Taillon is, the most, should be the best case for a rational, reasonable fan to hope for. And if Jameson Taillon is the best starting pitcher the Rangers get next year, this offseason, the Rangers are in some freaking trouble, because I think he's fine. He's fine. Just fine. Not great, not good, just fine to less than fine. He is a 31-year-old who was a former 2nd overall pick, went to high school in the Woodlands, Texas, was drafted out of high school very, very highly, and, has never really put it all together. Never really had that great a season. His best season did come in 2018. It was a pretty solid season, a 3.20 ERA, 190 innings. That is by far the most innings that he has pitched in his career, 179 strikeouts that year. This year was his 2nd most innings pitched with the Yankees, 177 innings, so decently durable, right? Wrong. I mean, he's had over 100 innings pitched in outside of 2019, where he, I believe, had Tommy John surgery that year and missed 2020. He only pitched 37 innings that year. Other than that, every year in his career, he's pitched at least 100 innings, with 177 this year and 140 last year with the Yankees. He's been perfectly average. Exactly ERA plus of 100 this year and last year, which means exactly average. So a middle of the rotation starter, which the Rangers, they need a top end of the rotation starter. They need one very badly, preferably a number 1. Would settle for a number 2 if they absolutely had to, but it seemed priority 1 should be a number 1 starter. Last year, he had a 3.91 ERA with the Yankees. The year before, a 4.30 ERA. It's fine. He's averaging around 5.5-ish innings per start. He makes a lot of his starts, but is just not that great in them. And he's not a particularly good strikeout pitcher. He doesn't walk a whole bunch of guys, doesn't give up a huge amount of home runs, just fine. There's nothing really spectacular about him. It's just, except for his walk rate. He was in the top 6% of baseball last year in walk rate. Cool. Fine. I just don't see how this could be the Rangers' top target. Let's see. We're going to throw in another starting pitcher. This one's a little bit more sexy. Chris Bassitt. I say probably the worst case scenario is if the Rangers miss out on all those top three guys, either they cheap out on their contract offers to Rodon, Verlander, and DeGrom, or those guys decide to go and play for some teams who have been in the postseason since 2016, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to want when you are one of the top 5-10 pitchers in all of baseball. Say the Rangers miss out on those guys, and all right, well, it's just Chris Bassitt left. He's the best pitcher on the market. Well, Rangers probably go throw some money at him. Say a 3-year, $66 million deal for him, and for Taillon, 3 years, $45 million. It's fine. That's about how much you're actually. That's more than you're gonna be paying John Gray. And I think that Jameson Taillon is a pretty decently worse pitcher than John Gray at this point in his career. But Chris Bassitt, say that's your number one guy. He's an all-star in 2021 with the A's. Had a really good season there. Was fine with the Mets this year. Pretty good. 180 innings, which was the most he's pitched in his career so far. 167 strikeouts. Just fine. Last year, he finished top 10 in Cy Young voting, actually exactly 10th the year before in a shortened season. Had a really pretty good year. A 2.29 ERA, finished 8th in Cy Young voting with the A's, 63 innings, again, in that shortened year. Has been one of the more consistent pitchers in baseball the last couple of years. Only 157 innings in 2021, but 180 this year. I think that's about what we can count on him going forward. He's been a fairly consistent workhorse for the last, since 2019, so the last 4 seasons, if my math is adding up there. He's expected or projected by Baseball Reference to pitch 167 innings next year with a 3.40 ERA. It's just, he's fine. He's better than Jameson Taillon, but I don't think he's better than anybody or better than everybody on this Ranger staff. I think Martin Perez next year, even if he regresses a little bit, is still going to be better than Chris Bassitt. I think John Gray is probably going to be better than Chris Bassitt, and it's fine. If he is the second guy that you get, if the Rangers get him, if he's the biggest free agent that they sign, but they also trade for one of those Milwaukee Brewers guys who are, top end of the rotation guys, I think that would be totally acceptable. Pretty good. I like Chris Bassitt. I think he's fine. But if he is the best pitcher that you get this offseason, then I think that is a sign of kind of punting. It's not really the going all in, and your expectations cannot be playoffs or bust, because if that's the best you get, that is not a roster that is constructed to contend for the postseason. That is a roster who is constructed to go about 500. Maybe they go a little bit above 500, but that is not a team that is going to be fighting with the Mariners or fighting with the Astros to win the division. No, absolutely no way in heck. They are probably not even fighting for whoever, the Mariners or some combination of AL East teams that are fighting for those wild card slots, or even, one of the second place, whoever's in second place in the AL Central. That is just not a team that is built for that. Coming up, we're going to look at a potential bat that could be disastrous, could be good, but kind of screams mid, just like this worst case scenario. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all at BetOnline.net. Literally recording this in the middle of having the World Cup on. Very, very fun stuff. If you're wanting to bet on the U.S. to go past the Netherlands, you can go bet there. If you were wanting to bet on the Mavs to go do some good things, or the Stars, or the Cowboys, or whatever have you, they have got it all at BetOnline. Always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today, or use your mobile device to learn more, because BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Now, of the free agent hitters that the Rangers could choose, there are a few guys on the more expensive side. I talked a little bit about Brandon Nimmo yesterday, how I think that if the Rangers do sign one of those big 3 pitchers, that they are not out on Brandon Nimmo, because I really don't think he's going to be that expensive, and I think would fit really, really well here. But there's another former Mets outfielder that I'm putting in this worst case scenario, not because I think he'd be bad, but because I am worried that, he could be bad. It's Michael Conforto. Say the Rangers sign him to a 3-year, $60 million deal. His projected value on his contract is about $20 million a year. That is according to SpotTrack. They have it at $20.779294 million average annual value, which is just extremely, extremely specific. If you don't know about this guy, well, you might have just started watching baseball last year, and he was not playing baseball last year because he had surgery. This is Michael Conforto, the former corner outfielder / center fielder for the New York Mets, a one-time All-Star, a pretty good option, a decent offensive player. He's going to be going into his age 30 season this year. For his career, he has an on-base of 356 and an OPS of 824, has played a lot of center field, right field, left field. I do think he's more suited to left field, but missed the entirety of the 2022 season with a shoulder surgery. He played 125 games in 2021 and had by far his worst year, a 729 OPS. The on-base was below 350. The slugging was below 400. Only had 14 home runs in 125 games. Just did not look right, did not look like his usual self. But the year before that, had a really, really great year with the Mets. 9 home runs in that shortened season of 54 games. For him specifically, a 927 OPS, which was his second highest. He also had his best season where he had an over 900 OPS. That was his only All-Star season in 2017 as a 24-year-old. So it's been a hot minute since then. He only played in 109 games that year, got hurt after the All-Star break, but still had 27 home runs that year. He's only had 3 years where he's had 20 or more home runs. Did have a 30 bomb season in 2019 as a 26-year-old, played over 150 games for one of just 2 times in his career. I am really nervous about the shoulder surgery. That is the main worry. I think he could be a risk worth taking, but if the Rangers aren't taking some other shots, I think the offense can kind of get away. Even if they didn't get a bat this offseason, I think the offense would still be average to above average, because I do think that Corey Seager is due for an offensive resurgence next year, and I think that Marcus Semien is overall going to have a better year, and, well, hoping that we can get a mostly healthy Mitch Garver will definitely improve the depth of this lineup, making that 1 through 5 really, really darn good. And you throw Michael Conforto in there, you kind of taking a chance on him as like your 6-hole hitter, depending on how Josh Young develops next year. It's fine. That's a pretty decent team. So I think this could be a risk worth taking, but in combination with all these other things, if Michael Conforto is the biggest swing that you're taking, I mean, Bassitt is relatively safe, Jameson Taillon relatively safe. I honestly don't know how much better he is than Jake Odorizzi, but you're basically adding a bunch of 3s and 4s to your pitching rotation that has been full of, well, 3s and 5s and 7s, honestly, at this point. But it still would be an improvement, but not a big enough improvement to, reach the heights that the Rangers are wanting to reach. I think shoulder injuries are especially scary with pitchers, a little bit more so with pitchers, because those are the things that don't really go away. Elbow issues, those are a little scary. You can get Tommy John surgery, but I mean, not that Tommy John is a 100% success rate anyway, like by any means nowadays. It's still kind of a relatively known thing, and it seems like every single pitcher and their mother gets it. But with shoulder injuries, those can continue. And with hitters, the big worries you have are some shoulder issues, and in the wrists and hands, those are also really, really scary. The elbow issues are not as big a concern with hitters. Usually you can bounce back from those. Sometimes, even if you have Tommy John as a hitter, you can recover a little bit faster. Bryce Harper, who just had Tommy John surgery, or the equivalent injury, I think he had the actual Tommy John surgery. He's going to be out until the All-Star break, and he just had that a week or two ago, a little bit before Thanksgiving, maybe in the early part of November. But still, I think there should be a little bit of a concern for him. I don't know if he gets a 3-year deal. Maybe that's a little bit much, but I think that was what Spotrac was projecting him to get. So that was kind of just what I went with for most of these contracts. They're a little bit better at projecting contracts than I am, because they have a lot more data and are better, honestly, at math than I am. Okay, no, they're projecting him for a 1-year, $20 million deal, but I think that there's a lot of teams that are willing to take a 1-year deal, but in order to get Conforto, I think it might take a multi-year deal. Maybe 3 years is a bit much. Maybe I put that on the higher end, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities for him to get a 3-year contract offer. He is a Scott Boras client, and the Rangers do have a good relationship there. Might be willing to do a little bit of an overpay to kind of keep themselves in Scott Boris's good graces. But again, I don't think they should have to do that much. I think they might, but I don't think they have to, because you sign that $500 million worth of Scott Boris money. Well, some of it's going to Boris, not all of it, but still. $500 million to Boris clients in a 2-day span should buy you a lot of goodwill for a long, long time. But all this is a long-winded way to say I think Conforto could be a decent player, could bounce back pretty well, but I am very wary of giving him $20 million a year, honestly, even for 1 year. But I think that if this is the biggest swing you're taking, that is a huge red flag that the Rangers are not as serious about contending for the playoffs next year as they say they are. Coming up, we're going to look at a bullpen option and what overall this team would look like and why I would be disastrously frustrated if this is their actual offseason result. But first, let's word from our sponsors. Now, the Rangers have also said that they want a late high leverage reliever as one of the things that they want. They say they want 2 starting pitchers. They want a bat, which pretty much just means left field because, again, like we've talked about before, it's pretty much assured that every other position is pretty safe in hand unless they want a full-time DH. And I don't think they're going to want that with Mitch Garver. Being basically, it'll seem like at least half DH. Anyway, let's look at some of the relief market. The Rangers probably should have already had a deal done with Matt Moore. The entire reason they didn't trade anybody at the trade deadline is that they wanted an exclusive negotiating window with their guys in Matt Moore and Martin Perez. Well, they missed the deadline for that exclusive negotiating window to get a contract done. These guys are completely free agents. Well, Martin Perez did end up signing the qualifying offer, but the Rangers didn't lock down either of these guys for long-term or even just any kind of contract extension during that window where they didn't trade him. It's stupid. They should have traded Matt Moore at the peak of his value, and if not, then you want him to be a part of your organization long-term, which I don't even necessarily think they need to do. You should have already locked him up to a long-term contract, but they didn't do that. So they completely wasted the back half of his season with the Rangers while he was having a career year. His market value is listed at $3.4 million, and they're projecting him for a 2-year, $6.8 million deal. That's fine. If they signed him to that, okay, cool. Whatever. It's not that exciting. I did like what he did last year. I was super skeptical about him being able to contribute really at all on a big league team, let alone in that capacity. He proved me wrong. He had a great year. Next year, Baseball Reference is projecting him for 73 innings and a 3.84 ERA, which is a pretty big step back. They have his strikeouts going way down, which I don't think they will. This year he had 10.1 Ks per 9 and 4.6 walks per 9. He needs to keep that down. The walks, if those could go down, then he goes from being pretty good to fantastic, and I think he already was pretty close to fantastic with the sub-2 ERA last year, and 74 innings, a really, really important multi-inning weapon. But if someone thinks they can fix him a little bit further and is more willing to go give him what he is demanding, then I think the Rangers very easily could lose out on him and then pull a panic move and go and sign one of the higher-end relievers to a longer term contract in a kind of a panic move. There are some guys out there who I am so worried about signing any free agent reliever, no matter how, even if it's outside of Mariano Rivera, I would be hesitant to sign any reliever to a big old contract. That includes 3 guys that have been fantastic for many years and one is just kind of shown a little bit of flash in the pan. But the 3 big guys are Aroldis Chapman, Kenley Jansen, Craig Kimbrell. Chapman has really, really fallen off and hurt his value. Kimbrell also fell off pretty hard this year. Jansen was fine, but I get the sense from the Braves that they are very willing to move on from him, and he wasn't quite as great as they had hoped. The numbers look pretty good. The splits for the first and second half, he didn't really fall off that much there. Still a pretty darn good pitcher, and you could count on him. And I think he's going to probably get the biggest contract of the relievers that are still on the market. I don't think he's getting more than a 5-year, $102 million deal that Edwin Diaz got. That was a lot of money. He might get a little bit more than Robert Suarez, who signed a 5-year contract extension to stay with the San Diego Padres. That was worth $46 million. And Rafael Montero signed a 3-year, $34 million deal. Some other guys who have gotten some deals. No one really all that spectacular. Old friend Jesse Chavez signed a 1-year, $1 million deal, and old friend Joey Rodriguez signed a 1-year, $2 million deal to sign with Boston. So the big names are basically those three, and there's also a couple other guys that I think are interesting. Corey Knebel, a former Ranger minor leaguer for just a hot minute. Don't think he ever played in the big leagues with the Rangers. Former Texas guy, pitched for Philadelphia last year, also pitched for the Dodgers for a little bit. I believe the Rangers got him in a trade for, I can't remember exactly who it was, one of those Brewers pitchers. Maybe he was in the Giovanni Gallardo trade, or maybe he was in the Jonathan Lucroy trade. I can't remember exactly where that guy came from or went, or no, maybe it was a Detroit trade. I don't know. One of those teams that I am not spending a whole lot of energy thinking about. I think he could be a fine guy, but I think the Rangers might panic and go big on one of the younger-ish guys of the upper echelon and spend big money on Taylor Rogers and betting that last year was an aberration as opposed to the trend. His market value is listed at $13.14 million average annual value by Spotrac, and I think that would be a huge mistake. The projected contract they have for him is 4 years, $52.5 million. I say the Rangers sign him for 4 years, just 52. They take off the half, but that would be, I think, a big mistake. He had a really bad year. He's projected for a not super great year next year. 15 saves, ERA over 4, 61 innings. Again, with the walk problems aren't as bad as they were this past year in Milwaukee. It was really rough. He didn't quite live up to expectations. When the Padres traded for him from Minnesota, he was coming off of his first ever All-Star season, a career ERA under 3.5 in 7 years at the big league level. He had a 4.3 ERA with San Diego, was just not doing well in 41 innings. They thought, all right, well, let's trade for Josh Hader. Josh Hader's having a crap year too. Maybe the Brewers can fix him because they're really good at teaching pitchers how to pitch good. And that really did not happen. He got even worse with Milwaukee. Had an ERA of nearly 5.5. So over a run a game, run per 9 worse in 20 innings. Did strike out a few more batters, but walked nearly twice as many and allowed 2.3 home runs per 9 as a closer. 6 homers in 23 innings with the Brewers. That's not what you're looking for. But that's not what he has done in his career. He has been about a little under 1 dinger per 9 innings, which is, about what you want from your closer if you can have. Very few homers per 9, and that's great. He only allowed 0.2 homers per 9 with San Diego, and I guess all of the homers just really caught up to him in Milwaukee. He was just saving them all for Milwaukee, but he also walked a whole lot of guys, which is not something he's done in his career. So maybe the Rangers bet on him to bounce back, and he doesn't. But again, you look at all of these and you add them up, and that's $60 million per year on the payroll for the next 3 years, and then the 13 million for Taylor Rogers in the fourth year after that. So you're adding about what I think they'll add to the payroll this year, but you're not really getting that much better. You're getting a little bit better, but you're not taking that big old leap. The Rangers needed to take a big leap from last year, 2021, to this year, 2022. I feel like they took a decent size step, not quite as big, and I think the team is better than it looked as the record, but you need to take another big step, maybe not a bigger step, because you already added the core pieces. You already got that locked into place, but just the rotation. You need those 2 top end-ish starters, and if you want to add a bat, just fine. But I feel like this is kind of my nightmare scenario. The Rangers end up with a bunch of money that looks not great on the books, guys who kind of improve your team a little bit in the short term. I do think empirically this would be a better team than last year, but it's nothing that really moves the needle in terms of them even competing for the Angels for third place. The Rangers were in fourth place in the division this year. They probably should have finished in third ahead of the Angels because they had just a disastrous year yet again. But I think this puts them squarely in fourth place in the AL West. It's not that much better. It's a little bit better because you have fewer starts by, Dane Dunning and Glenn Otto, who, again, did their jobs this year, but didn't really take that step forward like you would have wanted them to. If you're going to compete for the playoffs, you can't have a whole lot of starts by people past Dane Dunning in the rotation. Maybe Dunning steps it back up this year, has an ERA around 4, a little bit lower on the walk rate, fixes that, which would be a really nice thing for Maddox to come in. I'm really looking to see how he does with some of these younger pitchers, including maybe some Cole Reagan's time in the rotation. We'll see what that looks like next year. But I think this is, and to be fair, if this is the worst that it gets, then it should be all right. It shouldn't be. Rangers actually get nothing. They sign one pitcher and no bats and no relievers. I don't think there's a scenario where that happens. But I think for me, this would be my least ideal scenario. Signing a risky bat who is coming off of injury and a worse career season, just hit 30, and we'll see where he slots in this outfield. The starting pitching is fine, but even Bassitt, who has been pretty reliable, is still on the older side. He's going to be 34 next year, and Jameson Taillon is going to be 31 next year, and neither of those guys are super amazing. Maybe Bassitt finds his 2020 form and makes me look stupid, but if this is the group that you get, then I think that expectations, the ownership should not hold this group to playoffs or bust, because this would not be, in my opinion, a playoff roster unless something really stupid happens or something really great happens in that, Jack Leiter comes on and he's amazing, and some of the other pitching prospects or other prospects just jump up through the system, and Josh Young is incredible next year. I think that it would be the scenario where this roster would be a playoff roster, but I don't think this scenario is likely either. I think they're going to get somebody big, whether they make a big splash at trade. If they miss out on one of those top 3, I do think they're going to make some kind of a trade. But in this nightmare scenario, just want you to live in it for just a day and think, okay, well, hopefully it'll be better than this. And I think it will be. But thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen of the day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you all so much for listening and subscribing. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.